Hey guys! Tonight we're going to dive deep, not into the comforting depths of your duvet, but into the chilling, suffocating reality of Roman mines. Imagine, if you will, the flickering, oily lamp casting dancing shadows on rough-hewn rock, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of sweat, the distant, rhythmic clang of pickaxes echoing like a slow, mournful heartbeat. You're there, right now, in the relentless gloom, feeling the constant, dull ache in your muscles, the sting of grit in your eyes. This isn't just history, it's a sensory assault, a visceral journey into the unimaginable. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the precipice of an ancient abyss, the air cooling instantly as you step from the warm embrace of the Mediterranean sun into the maw of the earth. This isn't some quaint little quarry. This is a gaping wound in the landscape, a testament to an empire's insatiable hunger for wealth. Think of the Roman Empire, vast and powerful, its legions marching across continents, its cities gleaming with marble and gold. Where did all that splendor come from? It wasn't magic, and it certainly wasn't cheap. It came from here, from the dark, echoing tunnels of its mines, places that were, quite frankly, living hells on earth. You take your first tentative steps inward, the light from the entrance quickly fading behind you, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The ground beneath your worn sandals is uneven, strewn with loose rock and the damp detritus of human occupation. The smell hits you first, a complex, earthy odor of damp rock, stale air, human waste, and the faint, coppery scent of excavated ore. It's a smell that clings to your clothes, seeps into your skin, and, you suspect, will forever haunt your dreams. You're not here as a tourist. Mind you, you are here as one of the countless, nameless souls condemned to extract the very lifeblood of the Roman world. The vastness of the operation quickly becomes apparent. You don't just walk into a mine, you enter a sprawling, subterranean city of suffering. Shafts plunge downward into unfathomable depths, carved out by generations of desperate hands. Passages branch off in dizzying confusion, leading to different veins of ore, different levels of despair. The sheer scale of these operations, particularly in places like Rio Tinto in Spain or Dacia, modern-day Romania, is truly mind-boggling. Historians still debate whether the Romans truly understood the long-term environmental impact of their extensive mining, or if they simply considered the land an endless resource to be exploited. What is clear, however, is their absolute mastery of engineering, even when applied to such brutal ends. They employed sophisticated techniques for drainage, ventilation, and structural support, all designed to maximize extraction, not to preserve human life. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? The same mines that brought us aqueducts and grand amphitheaters also perfected the art of systematic human attrition. As you move deeper, the constant dull roar of activity surrounds you. It's not a cacophony, but a pervasive hum, the rhythmic thud of mallets against rock, the scraping of shovels, the low murmurs and occasional shouts of the workers. You see figures in the dim light, bent double, their bodies contorted by the labor. They are covered in dust, their faces streaked with sweat and grime, their eyes hollow and shadowed. These are not free men. Many are slaves, captured in conquests, or born into servitude. Others are convicts, sent here as a punishment more severe than death itself. For some, it's a life sentence. For many, it's a death sentence. Just stretched out over weeks, months, or if they are exceptionally hardy, a few short years. Consider the geology of it all. you're probably in a vein of copper, or perhaps lead, or even the glittering promise of silver or gold. The Romans sought everything iron for their tools and weapons, copper for their pipes and coins, lead for their plumbing and pigments, tin for bronze, and of course, the precious metals that fueled their economy and adorned their elites. The pursuit of these resources drove their imperial expansion as much as, if not more than, any grand ideological design. You could say that the very foundations of Roman power were built on the broken backs and calloused hands of these forgotten souls. It makes you think twice about that shiny denarius, doesn't it? You pick up a discarded piece of rock, feeling its weight, its cold, unyielding nature. Imagine breaking this, piece by piece, day after day. There are no machines here to do the heavy lifting, no powerful drills. It's all done with muscle, sweat, and primitive tools. You see men chipping away at the rock face with small, pointed picks. Their movements precise and repetitive. Others are using heavier hammers and chisels to loosen larger chunks. Once detached, the ore must be carried out, often in heavy baskets or sacks, up steep ramps or through narrow tunnels. This isn't a job you clock out from. This is a perpetual motion machine of human suffering, designed to operate until the very last ounce of strength is wrung from your body. The air quality is appalling. Even now, with only a few meters separating you from the entrance, you can feel the dust beginning to coat your throat, making each breath a little raspier. Deeper in, it would be far worse. Fine particles of silica and metal would hang suspended in the air, relentlessly attacking the lungs, setting the stage for respiratory diseases that would plague these workers until their inevitable, early demise. There's a particular kind of cough that echoes through these tunnels, a deep, guttural sound that speaks of lungs choked with dust, a symptom of a slow, agonizing suffocation. You try to clear your own throat, a small, futile gesture in the face of such pervasive toxicity. Then there's the water, or rather, the lack of it, or the excess of it. Many Roman mines, especially those extracting lead or silver, would flood frequently. An interesting detail, often overlooked, is the ingenious system of noria water wheels the Romans employed to drain these mines. Imagine massive, wooden wheels, sometimes operated by men treading on spokes like a hamster in a wheel, or by the relentless flow of underground rivers, constantly lifting water out of the lower levels. It was a Herculean task in itself, crucial for keeping the working areas accessible. Yet, even with these systems, stagnant water often collected in crevices, breeding ground for disease. You watch as a trickle of water seeps down a rock face, black with mineral deposits, and wonder how many would have been desperate enough to drink it. The social hierarchy within the mine is stark and brutal. At the bottom, of course, are you, the laborer, the disposable asset. Above you are the overseers, often former soldiers or trusted slaves, armed with whips and an absolute mandate to extract maximum output. Their job is to ensure you never rest, never slack, never even dare to dream of defiance. Their eyes are everywhere, scanning for any sign of weakness or insubordination. And further up still, the wealthy mine owners, often senators or powerful equestrians, who never set foot in these subterranean hells, content to count their profits from a safe, sunlit distance. This stratified system ensured that the suffering of the many directly contributed to the opulence of the few. It's a classic setup, really, one that's been repeated throughout history. But here, in the Roman mines, it reached a peak of industrial-scale dehumanization. You pause, leaning against a cold, damp wall, trying to catch your breath. Your muscles already ache, your hands feel raw, and the constant, dull roar of distant activity is starting to grate on your nerves. The utter lack of natural light, the perpetual twilight illuminated only by the weak glow of lamps, creates a disorienting effect. Days bleed into nights, hours into minutes, marked only by the shifting of shifts, if you're lucky enough to be on one. For many, It's simply an endless, grinding continuum of toil. The sheer physical demands are staggering. Imagine hacking away at rock for 12, 14, even 16 hours a day, fueled by meager rations, perhaps some hard bread, a handful of olives, and diluted wine. You're perpetually hungry, perpetually thirsty, perpetually exhausted. Your body, your only tool, is relentlessly pushed beyond its limits. Joints ache, muscles cramp, and injuries are a constant threat. A slip of the pickaxe, a falling rock, a sudden cave-in each moment carries the risk of disfigurement or death. You see a man limping, his leg bandaged crudely. Likely after a rockfall. There are no doctors down here. No proper care. You either heal on your own, or you become another casualty, another body to be unceremoniously discarded. It's a stark reminder that in this underground world, you are simply a means to an end. One might wonder, how did they endure? How did human beings, even under duress, continue to function in such an environment? Perhaps it was the crushing weight of hopelessness, the understanding that there was no escape. Perhaps it was the simple, primal drive to survive one more day, to see the meager light of dawn, even if it meant returning to the darkness. And for the lucky few, perhaps a fleeting moment of camaraderie, a shared glance of despair, a whisper of a forgotten song in the echoing gloom. But mostly, it was brute force and the complete stripping away of individual agency. As you consider this, a thought, almost a modern anachronism, drifts through your mind. You wonder if anyone ever tried to organize, to resist. The thought is quickly dismissed. The system was too efficient, too brutal. Any hint of rebellion would be met with swift, overwhelming force. These mines were not just workplaces, they were prisons, designed to break the spirit as effectively as they broke the body. And the Roman Empire was very good at breaking spirits. You can almost feel the weight of that oppression pressing down on you, heavier than the rock above. You continue your slow, laborious journey deeper into the mine, the initial shock giving way to a dull, constant sense of dread. The air grows heavier, warmer, and even more laden with dust. The flickering oil lamps, which once seemed to offer a meager comfort, now merely highlight the oppressive claustrophobia. You brush your hand against the rough rock face, feeling the cold, abrasive texture, and you imagine the skin of countless hands before yours, rubbed raw and bleeding against this same unforgiving stone. The methods of extraction were brutal in their simplicity. You observe gangs of men, stripped to the waist, their muscles rippling under a film of sweat and grime, wielding iron picks and wedges. They attack the rock face with a methodical ferocity, aiming for natural fissures and weaknesses in the stone. Each swing of the pick sends tremors through the rock, a dull, resonant thud that vibrates through your very bones. When a significant crack appears, they drive in wooden wedges, then soak them with water. The wood swells, exerting immense pressure, eventually splitting off large chunks of ore-bearing rock. It's an incredibly slow and physically demanding process, relying entirely on brute force and sheer numbers. You also notice evidence of fire setting, a technique as ancient as it was dangerous. In some sections, the rock is blackened and fractured. A telltale sign of this method, miners would build fires directly against the rock face, heating it to extreme temperatures. Then, they would suddenly douse the superheated rock with cold water, causing it to crack and shatter due to thermal shock. This method made the rock easier to break, but it also produced suffocating smoke and noxious fumes, especially from ores containing sulfur. Imagine the conditions: already limited oxygen, now consumed by fires, and the air filled with acrid smoke. It's a miracle anyone survived a shift, let alone years. The environmental impact of such practices, particularly deforestation for fuel, is something modern historians increasingly scrutinize. often debating whether the Romans fully grasped the long-term ecological consequences of their relentless resource extraction. Once the ore was loosened, the real back-breaking work began. You see lines of workers, bent low under the weight of heavy baskets or leather sacks, filled to the brim with ore. They shuffle along narrow, uneven passages, sometimes crawling through low-ceilinged tunnels that force them into painfully contorted positions. The weight is immense, often exceeding 50 or 60 pounds, and the distances covered are considerable. There are no conveyor belts, no mechanical hoists, just human muscle. Each step is a struggle, each breath a gasp for air. You can feel the strain in your own shoulders just watching, the phantom ache of effort. The excavated material wasn't just valuable ore. A significant portion was spoil, worthless rock that also had to be removed to access the valuable veins. This spoil had to be carried out of the mine and dumped, often forming immense slag heaps that still mar ancient mining landscapes today. So, not only were you extracting precious metals, but you were also moving mountains of useless rock, adding to the endless, exhausting cycle of labor. It truly makes you appreciate modern conveniences, like not having to carry a ton of dirt out of a hole with your bare hands. As you push deeper, the light from the entrance is now a distant memory, completely swallowed by the darkness. Your world is reduced to the small circle illuminated by your own lamp, and the immediate surroundings. This perpetual gloom, coupled with the echoing sounds and the constant danger, would have profound psychological effects. The concept of time itself would become blurred. Without the sun's rhythm, without any natural markers, days would merge into a single, unending stretch of darkness and toil. You imagine the gnawing sensation of disorientation, the slow erosion of hope that would accompany such an existence. The sheer volume of rock extracted by the Romans is a testament to their ambition and their capacity for sustained, organized brutality. At sites like the gold mines of Las Medulas in Spain, they literally moved mountains using hydraulic mining techniques, diverting rivers to wash away entire hillsides. While such large-scale surface mining was different from the deep shaft mines you are now in. It showcases the Roman mindset if a resource existed. They would find a way to extract it, no matter the cost in human lives or environmental devastation. It was a relentless, almost clinical pursuit of wealth. Think about the superstitions and beliefs that would have flourished in such an environment. Trapped underground, constantly facing danger, surrounded by death and darkness. These miners would have clung to any form of comfort or explanation. Perhaps whispers of malevolent spirits haunting the tunnels, or prayers to forgotten gods for safe passage. You might imagine a small, worn amulet clutched in a grimy hand, a desperate plea for protection against the ever-present threat of collapse or suffocating gas. An interesting historical detail is the discovery of small altars and votive offerings in some Roman mines, dedicated to various underworld deities or local spirits, highlighting the miners' desperate search for solace and protection. It's a reminder that even in the most dehumanizing conditions, the human spirit, however bruised, still sought meaning or hope. You hear a sudden, sharp crack from above, followed by the scuttering of loose stones. Your heart leaps into your throat. It's a common sound down here, but one that always brings a cold dread. The danger of cave-ins was ever present. The support structures, often simple wooden props, were rudimentary at best, and the geological stability of the rock was unpredictable. A sudden tremor, a weak point, or even just continuous excavation could lead to a catastrophic collapse, burying dozens, if not hundreds, alive in an instant. You instinctively flinch, casting a nervous glance upwards, then quickly resume your pace, not wanting to linger in any one spot for too long. The overseers, who you occasionally glimpse moving through the tunnels, are a constant, terrifying presence. They are typically Romans or trusted freedmen, and their authority is absolute. They carry whips, not just as symbols of power, but as tools of enforcement. Any sign of slowing down, Any perceived disobedience would be met with swift and brutal punishment. You see a glint of metal as an overseer passes, the sun-bronzed skin of his arm a stark contrast to the pale, dust-covered bodies of the laborers. There is no appeal, no mercy. Their job is to ensure productivity, and they fulfill it with chilling efficiency. It's a grim dance between survival and submission, with the odds stacked heavily against you. And then there's the pervasive feeling of being trapped. Imagine being miles from the surface, deep within the Earth's crust, knowing that every passage, every tunnel, every shaft is designed to lead you further into the mine, not out of it. The outside world, with its sunlight, its fresh air, its freedom, would feel like a distant, unattainable dream. You are not just physically imprisoned, you are psychologically bound. The walls around you are not just rock, they are the impenetrable barriers of your fate. This sense of hopelessness would be a constant companion, heavier than any basket of ore. You witness a group of men working in a particularly narrow vein, almost horizontal, requiring them to lie on their backs and chip away at the ceiling above them. The dust clouds they generate are denser here, swirling in the limited light, making it difficult to see, let alone breathe. This is not just labor, it's an extreme endurance test, day in and day out. The human body is remarkably resilient, but even it has its limits. These miners were pushed far, far beyond those limits, their lives becoming a slow, agonizing sacrifice on the altar of Roman prosperity. It's a chilling thought that the very comforts of Roman civilization were built upon such immense, unseen suffering. As you continue your descent, the faint sounds of the surface are completely gone, replaced by the intimate, unsettling acoustics of the deep earth. Every drip of water, every distant scrape of a tool, is amplified in the oppressive silence between bursts of activity. You pass through areas where the air hangs heavy and still, then through others where a faint, cool draft indicates a rudimentary ventilation shaft, a rare luxury in this brutal environment. The tunnels grow narrower in places, forcing you to duck and squeeze, the rough rock scraping against your clothes. The absence of natural light is perhaps the most profound psychological torment. Your world shrinks to the small dancing circle cast by your lamp, highlighting only what is immediately in front of you. Beyond that lies an impenetrable, absolute darkness that presses in on all sides, a constant reminder of your subterranean entrapment. This perpetual gloom erodes the very concept of day and night, blurring time into a seamless, endless stretch of physical exertion and mental anguish. You find yourself wondering what the sun looks like, what the open sky feels like on your skin, the memory of it already fading like a forgotten dream. The overseers, ever present, maintain a rigid schedule of work. There are no breaks for idleness, no moments of respite. You are expected to work without pause, driven by the crack of a whip or the threat of starvation. The rations provided are barely enough to sustain life, certainly not enough to fuel the incredible physical demands placed upon you. You gnaw on a piece of hard bread, its flavor bland, its texture like sawdust, and wash it down with a mouthful of stale water, warm and tasting faintly of minerals. This meager sustenance is all that stands between you and complete exhaustion, between functioning and collapsing. The danger extends beyond cave-ins and suffocation. You hear stories, whispered in hushed tones during the brief, enforced silences, of accidents. A man slipping on wet rock, falling into a chasm. Another struck by a loose rock dislodged by a careless swing of a pickaxe. There's a constant, low-level hum of anxiety that never truly dissipates. Every step, every swing, every breath carries a risk. You quickly learn to move with a heightened sense of awareness, constantly scanning the ceiling for cracks, listening for unusual sounds. A primal instinct for self-preservation honed by constant threat. It's a macabre dance with death, performed daily by hundreds, thousands. across the empire. One might imagine that given the harsh conditions, these miners would be expendable, easily replaced, and in many ways, they were. The Roman Empire had a seemingly endless supply of human capital, whether from conquests, debt slavery, or criminal convictions. Yet, they also had an interest in maintaining a functional workforce, albeit one pushed to its absolute limits. This leads to an intriguing point of academic debate. Scholars still debate the exact balance between immediate exploitation and the desire for sustained productivity in Roman mining operations. Was it always about extracting the maximum output in the shortest possible time, even at the cost of lives? Or were there some attempts, however minimal, to preserve the health of these workers to ensure a steady supply of labor? The archaeological evidence suggests a heavy leaning towards exploitation, but the nuanced realities of individual mines could have varied. You notice the tools used are surprisingly simple, yet effective. Beyond the picks and wedges, you see iron hammers, heavy and blunt, used to break larger rocks into manageable pieces. Smaller, more delicate chisels are used for finer work, or to extract specific ore veins. For lighting, clay oil lamps are ubiquitous, their wicks burning slowly, consuming precious oxygen and filling the air with acrid smoke. These lamps would have required constant refilling with oil, adding another small, tedious task to the already overburdened miners. It's a basic toolkit, yet it allowed the Romans to carve out astonishing underground networks. You wonder about the smiths who forged these tools. The hands that maintained them, a hidden economy of suffering supporting the grand one above. The waste management, or lack thereof, is also striking. Human waste would have been a significant problem in the deep mines. While some larger mines might have had designated areas or simple latrine systems, many would have simply seen waste accumulating in less traveled passages or discarded into shafts. This, combined with stagnant water and poor ventilation, created a breeding ground for diseases. You try not to breathe too deeply, trying to ignore the occasional foul stench that permeates the air, a grim testament to the unsanitary conditions. It's a constant battle against the invisible enemies of disease and infection, a battle most miners inevitably lost. You come across a group of younger men, perhaps boys, moving smaller baskets of spoil. Children, or those too small or weak for the heaviest labor, were often tasked with navigating the narrowest, most dangerous passages, or sorting the ore at the surface. Their presence is a stark reminder of the depth of the Roman demand for labor, encompassing even the most vulnerable. It makes you wince, seeing their slight frames, already bent by the early onset of a life of toil. This isn't just a job, it's an inherited curse, passed down through generations of the enslaved and condemned. Then there's the noise, the relentless, unchanging rhythm of human effort, the chipping, the scraping, the muffled shouts. It's a monotonous symphony of suffering that would gradually erode your sanity. You long for silence, for a moment of peace, but it never comes. Even when work pauses, the echoes linger, and the heavy breathing of your fellow prisoners fills the void. It's a sound that would penetrate your dreams, a constant reminder of your grim reality. You realize that escape, for many, was not a physical act, but a mental one, a retreat into the inner world of memory or fantasy, however fleeting. A historical fact that often surprises people is the sheer volume of silver extracted from mines like those at Laurion in ancient Greece, which greatly influenced the Athenian economy, and later, the Roman demand for precious metals. While Laurion predates much of the Roman imperial mining, the techniques and conditions were remarkably similar, setting a brutal precedent. The Romans learned from and adapted these methods, scaling them up to an industrial level across their vast empire. This continuous demand for silver and gold, driven by the need to mint coinage, fund armies, and adorn the elite, kept the wheels of this horrific industry turning relentlessly. You pass a small, roughly carved niche in the rock, almost hidden from view. Inside, you see a small, crude carving, perhaps of a local deity or a protective symbol. It's a poignant testament to the human need for hope, even in the most hopeless of places. These quiet acts of faith, often hidden from the watchful eyes of the overseers, were perhaps the only way to retain a semblance of humanity. A small rebellion against the crushing dehumanization of their existence. It's a fragile thread connecting them to something beyond the rock and the pickaxe, something spiritual amidst the physical torment. You pause for a moment, an almost involuntary act of respect for the unknown soul who carved it, and the silent prayer it represents. The air in the deeper sections of the mine is not just warm, but stiflingly hot. A damp heat that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel like drawing in soup. You can feel the sweat trickling down your back, stinging your eyes as it mixes with the ever-present dust. This heat is a result of the Earth's natural geothermal gradient. Combined with the heat generated by hundreds of working bodies and flickering oil lamps in confined spaces, it's a relentless, enervating force that saps your strength with every passing moment, making the already grueling labor even more unbearable. As you navigate the twisting passages, you begin to notice the ingenious, though brutal, methods of Roman ventilation. In some larger mines, they dug vertical shafts from the surface, acting as chimneys to draw out stale air, while other, lower shafts allowed fresh, cooler air to be drawn in. However, in smaller, more remote sections, ventilation was often minimal, relying on simple air currents generated by the movement of workers or the opening of new passages. You pass through a section where the air is particularly thick and heavy, and you instinctively quicken your pace, a primal fear of suffocation urging you forward. It's a cruel irony that the very air you need to survive is constantly being depleted and fouled by the act of survival itself. The working shifts were long, often stretching for 12 to 16 hours, sometimes even longer in desperate pushes for a particularly rich vein. There was little distinction between day and night for those trapped below ground. Your body's natural circadian rhythms would be completely disrupted, leading to a pervasive sense of disorientation and chronic fatigue. You watch a group of miners, their faces drawn and pale in the lamplight, trudging past you, their eyes glazed over with exhaustion. It's a weariness that seeps into your bones, a deep, pervasive fatigue that no amount of rest can truly alleviate. You realize that your entire existence down here is reduced to a single, relentless cycle of work, eat, and a brief, restless sleep, only to repeat the torment. Beyond the immediate physical dangers, the long-term health consequences for these miners were catastrophic. The dust, rich in silica and heavy metals, led to a host of debilitating respiratory diseases, most notably a form of silicosis, a progressive and irreversible lung condition. Each breath you take down here is slowly but surely destroying your lungs. You hear the hacking coughs echoing in the tunnels, a chilling soundtrack to their slow demise. Lead poisoning was another significant threat, particularly for those working in lead or silver mines, silver often being extracted from lead ore. Lead could enter the body through inhalation of dust or ingestion, leading to a host of terrifying symptoms: extreme abdominal pain, paralysis, blindness, and severe cognitive impairment. The thought sends a shiver down your spine. Scholars have often debated the exact causes of lead poisoning in ancient populations, including lead-lined pipes and cookware, but the conditions in these mines undoubtedly presented one of the most direct and potent sources. You might wonder about the diet of these unfortunate souls. It was, as you might expect, barely enough to sustain life. Grain, often barley, made into rough bread, olives, dried figs, and perhaps a small amount of sour wine were the staples. Meat was a rare luxury, reserved for the overseers and the free Roman citizens above ground. This inadequate nutrition, combined with the relentless physical exertion and the unsanitary conditions, left the miners susceptible to a myriad of other illnesses. Dysentery, typhus, and various parasitic infections were rampant. Your stomach rumbles, a constant companion in this world of scarcity, a reminder of the gnawing hunger that never truly leaves you. The psychological toll was immense. Imagine the perpetual darkness, the claustrophobia, the constant fear of collapse, the brutal discipline, and the utter hopelessness of your situation. It's a scenario designed to break the human spirit. Many would have succumbed to despair, leading to apathy, depression, and a loss of the will to live. Suicides, though difficult to document in the historical record, must have occurred. For others, a sort of grim resignation would set in, a detached acceptance of their fate, their minds seeking refuge in a blank, emotionless state. You find yourself trying to remember the faces of loved ones, the warmth of the sun, anything to hold on to a shred of your former life before this darkness consumed you. In the midst of this despair, however, there were occasional, fleeting moments of human connection, a shared glance of understanding, a quiet sigh of mutual exhaustion, perhaps a whispered word of encouragement when an overseer wasn't looking. These tiny gestures, almost invisible in the grand scheme of the mine, would have been precious, a reminder that you were not entirely alone in your suffering. It's a strange thought that even in the most dehumanizing environments, the spark of human connection can flicker, however weakly. You observe the crude medical care available, which is to say, almost none. Injuries were common: broken bones, lacerations, crushed limbs. Without proper antiseptic, infections would quickly set in, leading to gangrene and often death. A man lies slumped against a wall, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, moaning softly. No one rushes to his aid. He is simply another casualty, another body that will eventually need to be removed. It's a stark illustration of your own expendability. Your life, your suffering, means nothing compared to the ore that needs to be extracted. An interesting, if grim, point often discussed by archaeologists studying Roman mining sites is the discovery of mass graves containing large numbers of young male skeletons, many showing signs of extreme physical stress, malnutrition, and injuries consistent with mining accidents. These findings offer chilling validation to the literary accounts of the brutal conditions and short lifespans of Roman miners, providing concrete evidence of the human cost. It makes you realize that the stories you've heard, the suffering you're witnessing, are not exaggerations, but the stark reality of countless forgotten lives. You come across a small, dark pool of water, reflecting the faint lamplight like a black mirror. It's stagnant, probably contaminated, and yet you see a man furtively cupping his hands, attempting to drink from it. The desperation is palpable. It's a choice between immediate thirst and the almost certain consequence of illness. A choice that speaks volumes about the level of suffering these individuals endured. You feel a pang of empathy, a shared human need for something as fundamental as water, even in this poisoned, dark world. The sheer scale of the Roman mining operations meant that they were not just isolated pits in the ground, they were complex, organized industrial sites. You're now navigating a section that feels less like a natural cave and more like a purpose-built labyrinth, with various levels and specialized areas. You might pass by a small, enclosed space where a group of men are meticulously crushing ore. This isn't fine work, it's brute force again, using heavy iron hammers or large stone pestles to break down the larger chunks of ore into smaller, more manageable pieces. The noise here is deafening, a relentless clang and crunch that vibrates through your skull, leaving your ears ringing. The dust, already omnipresent, is even thicker in these crushing areas, a choking cloud that constantly obscures your vision and coats every surface. Once crushed, the ore would often undergo a process of washing or leviation. You might stumble upon a series of shallow, sloping channels, carved into the rock or lined with wood. Water, often painstakingly brought in from underground springs or diverted from drainage systems, would be run over the crushed ore. The heavier, valuable metallic particles would settle to the bottom, while the lighter, worthless rock and dirt would be washed away. This process, while essential for separating the valuable minerals, was incredibly labor-intensive. requiring constant agitation and supervision. And imagine standing in cold, often contaminated water for hours on end. Your bare feet or sandals sinking into the muddy slurry, battling the elements even underground. The ingenuity of Roman engineering, even in such a brutal context, is remarkable. They built complex systems of aqueducts and channels not just to bring water to their cities, but also to power their mining operations and drain the subterranean workings. You might spot a carefully constructed wooden flume, carrying a stream of water through a section of the mine. Its purpose clear to aid in the separation of ore or to manage the constant battle against flooding. It's a stark contrast between the sophisticated engineering and the primitive, dehumanizing labor that utilized it. It's like using a finely tuned engine to power a relentless, human-powered treadmill. The threat of gas was another insidious danger. Deeper sections of mines, particularly those rich in coal or certain metallic ores, could accumulate pockets of dangerous gases like methane or carbon monoxide. These gases were odorless and colorless, making them invisible killers. A sudden pocket of methane could ignite with a lamp flame, causing an explosion or simply displace oxygen, leading to rapid suffocation. Carbon monoxide, a byproduct of incomplete combustion from lamps or fires, would silently creep into the air, causing drowsiness, confusion, and eventually, death. There were no gas detectors, no safety protocols. The only warning was often the sudden collapse of a fellow miner, or the rapid extinction of a lamp flame, signs that often came too late. You feel a prickle of anxiety, a subconscious urge to sniff the air, though you know it would do no good. You notice the utter lack of safety gear. No helmets, no sturdy boots, no protective clothing. Your body is exposed to the jagged rock, the falling debris, the constant abrasions. Minor cuts and scrapes are inevitable. And in this unsanitary environment, they quickly fester and become infected. A small wound, ignored or untreated, could quickly escalate into a life-threatening infection. A cruel irony given the vast medical knowledge the Romans possessed in other areas. But here, in the mines, that knowledge was rarely applied to the disposable workforce. The noise of constant work would also have led to hearing loss. The hammering, the crushing, the echoing shouts. It was a constant assault on the ears. Over time, many miners would have developed significant hearing impairment, adding another layer of isolation and difficulty to their already challenging lives. You try to imagine a world where silence is a luxury, a forgotten memory, replaced by an incessant, grinding din. Then there's the food. We touched upon it earlier, but it bears repeating. It wasn't just meager, it was often bland, repetitive, and nutritionally deficient. Imagine eating the same tasteless gruel, day after day, year after year. The lack of fresh produce meant an absence of essential vitamins, leading to conditions like scurvy. This chronic malnutrition weakened the body, making it even more susceptible to disease and less capable of healing from injuries. You can almost taste the gritty, stale bread, feel its leaden weight in your stomach, providing just enough energy to keep you from collapsing, but never enough to thrive. One fascinating, albeit gruesome, point of archaeological debate surrounds the use of animals in Roman mines. While most deep excavation was human-powered, some larger, more accessible tunnels or surface operations might have employed mules or donkeys to haul carts of ore or to power drainage wheels. However, scholars still debate the extent of animal use in the deepest, most dangerous shafts, as the logistical challenges of keeping them alive and working in such conditions would have been immense. It's a strange mental image, the desperate faces of human slaves, working alongside exhausted beasts of burden, both equally exploited for the empire's insatiable appetite. You can almost smell the animal sweat mixing with the human, adding another layer to the already overwhelming stench of the mine. You might stumble upon a small, makeshift sleeping area, carved out of the rock face. There are no beds, no blankets, just a few tattered rags or straw mats on the cold, damp ground. Sleep, when it came, would be fitful and incomplete. haunted by the sounds of the mine, the aches in your body, and the chill that seeped into your bones. There was no escape, even in dreams. The mine invaded every aspect of your existence, permeating your waking hours and your restless slumber. The constant tension of living on the edge of disaster would have slowly eroded mental well-being. The fear of collapse, the fear of overseers, the fear of disease, the fear of simply not being able to endure another day. It all coalesced into a pervasive anxiety. Some might have cracked under the pressure, succumbing to madness or despair. Others might have developed a grim stoicism, a hardened shell to protect themselves from the brutal reality. You find yourself adopting a similar blankness, a survival mechanism against the overwhelming suffering. The very hierarchy of the Roman mine, from the lowliest slave to the highest-ranking overseer, was designed to maximize efficiency through intimidation and control. You occasionally glimpse the overseers, often former legionaries or trusted freedmen, moving through the tunnels, their lamps casting long, distorted shadows that seem to stretch like predatory limbs. They carry whips, not just for show, but as instruments of immediate and brutal correction. A slow pace, a whispered conversation, a moment of perceived idleness. Any transgression, real or imagined, is met with swift, physical punishment. There are no questions asked, no excuses accepted. The constant threat of the whip hangs heavy in the air, a nonverbal language of absolute power. The discipline extended beyond physical pain. Food rations could be reduced, water withheld, or shifts extended for those deemed unproductive or rebellious. Imagine the crushing despair of having your already meager sustenance further diminished. The gnawing hunger intensified, simply because you couldn't keep pace with the relentless demands. This system of punishment and deprivation was incredibly effective in breaking the spirit and ensuring compliance. You find yourself instinctively lowering your gaze when an overseer passes. A conditioned response born of constant fear, a tiny act of submission that feels utterly degrading. For those who were not slaves but convicts, the mine was a living tomb. Many were condemned to the mine's admetalla, to the metals, a sentence often equivalent to a death penalty, only more prolonged and agonizing. These individuals were seen as utterly disposable, their lives forfeited to the state for their crimes. This might include anything from petty theft to more serious offenses, or even political dissent. Their only value was their labor, and they were worked until they dropped. It makes you realize the complete lack of human rights, the absolute power wielded by the Roman state over its subjects, especially those deemed undesirable. The methods of ore transportation within the mine, beyond the human carriers, were also rudimentary but effective. In some larger tunnels, you might see small wooden carts, often on primitive wooden rails or simply dragged along a smooth, packed dirt floor. These carts, however, would still be pulled by human power, sometimes by a single individual, sometimes by a team, their bodies straining against the ropes or harnesses. The inclines would have been particularly brutal, requiring immense effort to haul the heavy loads upwards. It's a slow, arduous process, each ounce of ore costing immense physical exertion. You notice the lack of personal possessions. No one carries anything beyond the absolute necessities for survival. There are no mementos, no comforts, no personal tokens of a life outside the mine. Everything that defined you as an individual before entering this hellish realm has been stripped away. You are simply a pair of hands, a body to be exploited, interchangeable with hundreds, thousands of others. This dehumanization is perhaps the most insidious form of suffering, slowly eroding your identity until nothing but the instinct for survival remains. The Roman fascination with precious metals wasn't just about wealth. It was about power, prestige, and the projection of empire. Gold and silver were essential for minting the vast quantities of coinage needed to pay legions, fund public works, and engage in trade. The very stability of the Roman economy rested on the relentless extraction of these metals from the earth, Thus, your suffering, your agonizing labor, directly contributed to the grandeur and stability of an empire that saw you as nothing more than a resource. It's a chilling thought that the beautiful Roman mosaics, the soaring aqueducts, the very toga on a senator's back, were all paid for, in a very real sense, with the lives of people like you. An intriguing point of historical debate revolves around the possibility of skilled workers within the mining hierarchy. While the majority were unskilled laborers, there must have been individuals with specialized knowledge of geology, engineering, or metallurgy. Historians still debate the extent to which these skilled individuals were free Roman citizens, freedmen, or highly specialized slaves, and how their conditions differed from the general workforce. Did they receive better treatment, better food, or even a glimmer of hope for freedom? Or were they simply more valuable assets, still ultimately owned and exploited? The archaeological evidence is often ambiguous, but it's a question that sheds light on the nuances of Roman social structures. Even in the darkest corners of their empire, you hear a strange, high-pitched squealing sound. It's the sound of rats. These unwelcome denizens of the deep are ever present, scuttling in the shadows, attracted by the meager food scraps and waste. While not an immediate threat, their presence adds to the general squalor and constant low-level irritation. They are another reminder of the unsanitary conditions, another vector for disease. You flinch as one darts across your foot. A fleeting, repulsive contact in the omnipresent gloom, the sheer loneliness, even amidst hundreds of others, can be crushing. While there are moments of shared suffering, there's often little opportunity for genuine connection or conversation, particularly under the watchful eyes of the overseers. Most communication is reduced to grunts, sighs, or brief, functional commands. This enforced isolation, combined with the perpetual darkness and relentless labor, could lead to a profound sense of alienation, severing you from your past, your identity, and ultimately, your own humanity. You pass by a section where the rock is particularly resistant, requiring immense force. The walls here are scarred with countless pick marks, overlapping like desperate calligraphy. It's a visual representation of the sheer, unyielding effort required. Every inch gained was hard-won. Every ounce of ore extracted a monument to human agony. You realize that these mines are not just places of work, but vast, subterranean monuments to suffering, built not with stone and mortar, but with broken bodies and shattered spirits. The echoes of their screams, their cries, their silent despair seem to reverberate from the very walls around you. As you continue deeper into the bowels of the earth, the feeling of oppressive weight increases. The rock above you feels less like a ceiling and more like an active participant in your confinement, pressing down with unimaginable force. You pass through areas where the tunnels are shored up with heavy timbers, a crude but vital defense against the ever-present threat of collapse. These wooden beams groan and creak under the immense pressure, a constant, unsettling reminder of the precarious balance between stability and imminent disaster. The Roman mining operations were not merely about extraction, they were also about processing the ore at or near the site. You might encounter small, rudimentary furnaces, or areas where ore was prepared for smelting. For gold and silver, the process of cupellation was often used, which involved heating the lead-rich silver ore in a specialized furnace, with bone ash absorbing the lead, leaving behind pure silver. This was a highly toxic process, releasing lead fumes into the air, which would have been lethal for anyone working nearby without protection. And of course, there was no protection. Imagine breathing in those invisible poisons, slowly but surely destroying your body from the inside out. The light source, your humble oil lamp, is both a necessity and a danger. It consumes precious oxygen, produces smoke, and is a constant fire hazard. A single spark, a spilled lamp, or a poorly maintained flame could ignite dry timbers or pockets of gas, leading to catastrophic fires or explosions. Yet, without it, you are plunged into absolute, disorienting darkness, a nightmare of claustrophobia and terror. You instinctively guard your lamp, its small, flickering flame representing your only window to a tangible world. The concept of escape in these Roman mines was almost entirely mythical. The mines were often located in remote, desolate areas, far from population centers. They were heavily guarded by armed overseers and sometimes even legionaries or specialized slave guards. The entrances were strictly controlled, and the surrounding landscape offered little in the way of cover or sustenance for a fugitive. Even if you somehow managed to evade detection within the mine and reach the surface, your chances of long-term survival were astronomically low. You would be a marked man, easily identifiable by your emaciated physique, your dust-caked skin, and the distinctive smell of the mine that would cling to you. However, the human spirit, even under the most crushing conditions, sometimes found ways to resist, however small or desperate. These acts were rarely outright rebellions, which were almost always brutally suppressed. More often, resistance took the form of passive defiance, slowing down work when not directly observed, sabotaging tools in subtle ways, or feigning illness. Such acts carried immense risks, but they were perhaps the only way to reclaim a tiny sliver of agency in a life utterly devoid of choice. Historians still debate the true extent and effectiveness of slave resistance in Roman mines, as evidence is scarce and often interpreted through the lens of Roman fear and control, but the mere possibility, however faint, speaks volumes about the human yearning for freedom. You notice the sheer diversity of accents and languages among the miners. Rome's empire was vast, encompassing dozens of different peoples and cultures. Slaves and convicts would have been brought from across the conquered world: Gauls, Britons, Dacians, Thracians, Africans, Syrians, Jews. This linguistic babel, while sometimes a barrier to communication, might also have fostered unexpected bonds of solidarity among those sharing a common, terrible fate. A shared glance of understanding, a quiet nod of shared suffering, transcending language barriers, speaks to the universal nature of human misery and resilience. The hygiene conditions, as you might expect, were appalling. Washing facilities were non-existent or extremely primitive. Miners lived and worked in their own filth, covered in dust, sweat, and often, human waste. This complete lack of sanitation, combined with poor nutrition and constant physical stress, made them extremely vulnerable to disease. Epidemics could sweep through the mine populations with devastating speed, wiping out dozens, even hundreds, in a short period. You try to avoid touching the walls, the tools, anything that might harbor unseen pathogens, but you know it's a futile effort. Then there's the pervasive feeling of being forgotten. These mines were out of sight, out of mind for the vast majority of the Roman populace. The glittering cities, the grand villas, the public spectacles, all were far removed from the brutal reality of where their wealth originated. You are part of an invisible, disposable workforce, living and dying in darkness, your existence unacknowledged by the very empire you serve. This sense of being utterly insignificant, a mere cog in a colossal machine, would slowly gnaw at your soul. A practical, yet morbid detail often overlooked is the process of corpse disposal. Given the high mortality rates, the Romans would have developed systems for removing bodies. While some might have been buried in communal graves near the mine, others might have been unceremoniously dumped in disused shafts or simply left in place if a collapse made retrieval impossible. The dead were just as expendable as the living, perhaps even more so. You imagine the grim task of carrying out a body, another hollow shell emptied by the relentless demands of the mine, a stark glimpse into your own probable future. It's a sobering thought, that even in death, there would be no dignity, no recognition. The constant bone-jarring vibration of the mine is a pervasive sensation, even when you are resting, or attempting to. The earth itself seems to hum with the distant echoes of picks striking rock, the creak of timbers, and the rhythmic thud of heavy loads being moved. It's a low-frequency rumble that penetrates your very core, preventing true relaxation and slowly contributing to a pervasive sense of agitation and unease. This isn't a quiet place. It's a living, breathing beast of industry, constantly churning, constantly consuming. You come across a group of young boys, perhaps no older than 8 or 10, tasked with collecting loose fragments of ore that have fallen from the rock face. Their small, nimble fingers are ideal for reaching into narrow crevices, but their slight frames are clearly not meant for such strenuous, dangerous labor. They move with a haunting silence, their eyes wide and perpetually wary, already showing the deep-set weariness that will mark them for the rest of their short lives. Their presence is a stark, heartbreaking reminder of the absolute desperation for labor and the complete disregard for childhood that characterize these operations. It is a chilling sight. These tiny figures swallowed by the vast, dark maw of the earth, destined to become another statistic in the empire's relentless pursuit of wealth. The very air you breathe is not just dusty but often putrid. Beyond human waste, the decomposition of animal carcasses, if any were used or died underground, and the stagnant pools of water would have created a noxious cocktail of smells. You try to breathe shallowly, to minimize the intake of these offensive odors, but it's a futile effort. The stench permeates everything, clinging to your clothes, your skin, your hair. A constant, unpleasant reminder of the unsanitary and death-ridden environment you inhabit. It is an assault on yet another sense, a constant grinding down of your ability to feel clean or comfortable. The diet, as previously mentioned, was not only inadequate in quantity but also severely lacking in variety and essential nutrients. Without fresh fruits and vegetables, diseases caused by vitamin deficiencies, like scurvy caused by a lack of vitamin C, would have been rampant. Scurvy manifests with bleeding gums, severe fatigue, joint pain, and poor wound healing, further debilitating the already weakened miners. Imagine trying to wield a pickaxe with aching joints and a mouthful of bleeding sores. It's a brutal reality that underscores the systemic neglect of these workers' basic human needs. An interesting, if grim, point of contention among historians is the precise mortality rate in Roman mines. While all agree it was exceptionally high, precise figures are difficult to ascertain due to patchy records and the clandestine nature of some operations. Scholars still debate whether the life expectancy of a Roman miner, particularly a slave or convict, was measured in mere months or a few short years. But the consensus is that few survived beyond their early 30s. If they even reached that age within the mine, the constant turnover of the workforce due to death and disease meant a perpetual demand for new bodies, a grim conveyor belt of human suffering feeding the empire's insatiable hunger for resources. The methods of communication within the mine would have been basic. Shouts, whistles, or the rhythmic tapping on pipes or rock faces were used to convey messages, warnings, or instructions across distances. You hear a series of sharp taps echoing from a distant shaft, a coded message that you, as a new arrival, don't yet understand, but which clearly conveys urgency to the older hands around you. It's a reminder of the subtle, unwritten rules and communications that develop in such enclosed, dangerous environments. A way for those trapped within to convey vital information without alerting their oppressors. You notice the utter lack of individual identity. You are referred to by a number, a designation, or simply as slave, convict, miner, your name, your family, your past life, all are irrelevant here. This stripping away of personal identity is a deliberate act of dehumanization, making it easier for the overseers to view you as a tool, an object, rather than a sentient being capable of thought, feeling, or resistance. You try to hold on to your name, to whisper it to yourself in the darkest hours. A small act of defiance against this systematic erasure. The psychological impact of perpetual darkness, as you've felt, is profound. It not only disrupts your circadian rhythm, but also plays tricks on your mind. Hallucinations, disorientation, and a heightened sense of paranoia would have been common. The constant pressure, the lack of stimulation beyond the immediate task, and the gnawing fear would combine to create a deeply unsettling mental state. You might find yourself seeing things in the shadows, hearing voices that aren't there, or experiencing moments of profound despair that push you to the brink of sanity. It is a mental torture as severe as the physical torment. The constant dampness of the mine, combined with the lack of proper clothing, would lead to perpetual cold and chilblains, particularly in regions with cooler ambient temperatures. Your body is always slightly shivering, always fighting against the insidious chill that seeps into your bones, even in the warm sections of the mine. This constant state of being cold further weakens the immune system, making you even more susceptible to illness. A vicious cycle that further grinds down your already depleted reserves. You wrap your arms around yourself, trying to generate some warmth, a futile gesture against the Earth's relentless embrace. The scale of Roman mining operations required sophisticated, albeit brutal, logistics. You witness the constant movement of supplies into the mine: fresh oil for lamps, timber for supports, and the meager food rations that keep the workers alive. Conversely, the extracted ore, now crushed and sometimes even initially processed, had to be transported out. This constant flow, often managed through a complex network of internal shafts and ramps, was a finely tuned machine of exploitation, designed for maximum efficiency and minimal cost. Every single piece of ore represented not just wealth, but an untold number of human efforts, human pains, and human lives consumed by the process. The danger of rockfalls, as you've keenly felt, was ever present. These weren't always catastrophic cave-ins. Often, it was smaller. Individual pieces of rock dislodging from the ceiling or walls due to vibrations, structural weaknesses, or the relentless chipping of picks. A falling rock, even a small one, could cause a serious injury: a concussion, a broken limb, a deep gash turning a productive worker into a liability, or worse. You learn to instinctively duck and cover at the slightest sound of shifting stone, a reflex honed by fear and constant exposure to danger. It's a cruel reminder that even the earth itself seemed to conspire against your survival. The psychological impact of the mine extends to the senses beyond what you might expect. The constant lack of visual stimulation, beyond the flickering lamp, would lead to profound sensory deprivation. Your other senses, particularly hearing and touch, would become hyper-alert, but also distorted. Every creak of timber, every drip of water, every distant scrape of a tool would be amplified, sometimes to the point of maddening intensity. You might start to perceive patterns in the shadows, or hear phantom whispers carried on the stale air. This sensory distortion adds another layer to the mental torment, blurring the lines between reality and illusion. One fascinating and often debated aspect of Roman mining is the concept of concessions. While some mines were directly operated by the state, many were leased to private individuals or companies, who then bore the responsibility and expense of extracting the ore and supplying the labor. Historians still debate whether private ownership led to even harsher conditions, as profit motives might have overridden any state-imposed regulations or limited humanitarian concerns. It's a compelling question: did the pursuit of private wealth exacerbate the already horrific conditions, pushing the boundaries of human exploitation even further than state-run enterprises? The evidence suggests that, regardless of ownership, the drive for output remained paramount. You witness a group of men engaged in the incredibly dangerous task of exploratory digging. These are the pioneers of the mine, pushing into unknown sections, testing the rock for new veins, assessing geological stability. Their work is the most perilous, as they face the highest risk of unexpected cave-ins, gas pockets, or encounters with underground water. They move with a tense, focused intensity, knowing that a single misjudgment could seal their fate. It's a stark reminder that even within this hell, there are degrees of suffering and levels of risk, with the pathfinders facing the deadliest odds. The concept of personal hygiene was virtually non-existent. The miners lived and worked in their own grime, sweat, and bodily fluids. The air was thick with dust and the stench of unwashed bodies. Skin diseases, fungal infections, and open sores were rampant, often leading to secondary infections that could be fatal. You run a hand across your face, feeling the gritty film, the dried sweat, the constant itch of dirt and irritation. It's a battle against perpetual uncleanliness, a losing fight that slowly grinds down your sense of dignity and comfort. The absence of a future, the sheer hopelessness of your situation, is a pervasive psychological burden. There is no concept of retirement, no possibility of saving up for a better life. Your existence is defined by the mine, and it will end in the mine. This crushing finality, the knowledge that your suffering will only cease with death, is perhaps the heaviest burden of all. It steals not just your present, but your very capacity to dream or hope. You might see small, makeshift shrines or carvings on the walls, perhaps a rough sketch of a protective deity or a simple cross for those who had adopted Christianity. These are acts of quiet defiance, small assertions of faith in a place where hope is constantly extinguished. They represent a desperate plea for protection, a whisper of connection to something beyond the brutal reality of the mine. You observe one such carving, its lines worn smooth by countless touches, and feel a momentary shared sense of human longing. The constant, low rumble of the earth is now a familiar companion, a sound that has seeped into your very bones, becoming almost indistinguishable from the beating of your own weary heart. You've journeyed through the harrowing layers of Roman mining, from the brutal labor and primitive tools to the pervasive dangers and utter dehumanization. As you near the end of this subterranean descent, the cumulative weight of suffering feels almost tangible, pressing down with the very rock above. The system of forced labor was the bedrock of Roman mining, whether through outright slavery, penal servitude, or the inescapable bonds of debt. There was no escape clause, no union, no appeals process. Your life was forfeit to the empire's insatiable demands. You were a unit of labor, to be worked until you broke, and then replaced. This chilling efficiency in human exploitation allowed Rome to fuel its vast economy, fund its legions, and adorn its cities with the very metals extracted from these dark, forgotten places. It's a stark reminder that behind every glittering Roman coin, every impressive public building, lay untold suffering. The psychological long-term effects on the few who might have survived a considerable time in the mines, or who were eventually freed, would have been profound and lasting. PTSD, chronic depression, severe physical ailments, and a deep-seated distrust of authority would likely have been common. Imagine returning to the sunlight, your body broken, your mind scarred, a ghost of your former self, forever haunted by the echoes of the picks and the cries of the dying. The mine never truly leaves you. A point of ongoing historical speculation is the exact role of women and children in these deep mines. While it's clear children were used, and women were often involved in surface processing like ore sorting and washing, historians still debate the extent to which women were forced into the darkest, most dangerous underground sections of the mines, especially in regions where labor was exceptionally scarce or in specific cultural contexts. The evidence is fragmented, but the possibility adds another layer of grim reality to an already horrific picture, suggesting that no demographic was entirely safe from the empire's rapacious demand for labor. The very landscape around these ancient mines often tells a grim story. Immense piles of slag, the waste product from smelting, stretch across vast areas, sometimes for miles, poisoning the soil and rivers for centuries to come. You might see the blackened earth, the stunted vegetation, a testament to the environmental devastation wrought by these operations. The Roman quest for metal left an indelible mark not just on human lives, but on the natural world itself, a legacy that endures to this day. It makes you realize that the impact of human greed is often far-reaching, affecting generations. And even the very earth we stand upon, the silence, when it occasionally falls, is not peaceful. It is the heavy, unsettling silence of profound exhaustion, of suppressed fear, of unspoken despair. It's the sound of bodies pushed to their absolute limit, of minds teetering on the brink. You find yourself holding your breath during these rare lulls, listening to the strained breathing of those around you, a collective sigh of quiet agony that speaks louder than any shout. The enduring legacy of these Roman mines isn't just in the artifacts they produced or the wealth they generated, it's in the stark, timeless lesson they offer about the darkest aspects of human exploitation. They remind us of the lengths to which societies can go in pursuit of power and riches, the readiness to dehumanize and sacrifice countless lives for the benefit of a few. It's a cautionary tale, echoing through the centuries, a whisper from the depths about the true cost of empire. As your time in this deep, dark world draws to a close, you allow your eyes to linger on the rough-hewn walls, the dripping water, the faint, acrid smell that now feels strangely familiar, the sounds of distant picks, the heavy breathing of unseen figures, the faint creak of timber. They are all fading, slowly dissolving into the profound quietude of the earth. The images of exhaustion, of fear, of silent suffering begin to blur, like shadows retreating before a gentle dawn. The bitter cold that clung to your skin softens, replaced by a phantom warmth. The dust that coated your throat lifts, and each breath feels a little lighter, a little clearer. You let go of the tension in your shoulders, the ache in your back, the gnawing hunger in your stomach. The absolute darkness gives way to a soft, enveloping gray, and then a gentle, diffused light, like the first hint of morning spilling over a distant horizon. The sounds of this harrowing journey recede further, becoming nothing more than a faint, distant hum, a lullaby of history fading into the tranquil stillness of the night.